Hey, Susan, sorry to be late.
That's okay. I think I've got it going.
Sorry, what?
I think I have it all done. We're live on YouTube.
Yep. You may want to pause that until people join, because people have a funny way of joining and saying unfortunate things. You will need to press record at the appropriate time, but now's not it.
How do I stop the live stream and start it again? Maybe I'll just keep it going. There are 2 people already watching.
Oh, I don't see them. Okay. It's just you and me. Let me see. You've got the live transcript enabled. That's great.
Okay.
Let's see. So the record to the cloud is the only thing you got left to do whenever, the co-chairs join you in like that.
Okay. So it looks like your tutorial was pretty good.
I hope so.
Okay.
There's always something I forget.
But we might be live on YouTube, so don't talk about anything interesting.
Did you do the chat thing where only the attendees can only? It's so weird.
Do that?
So if you're the host, so if you go to chat, there should be a little up arrow that gives you options, and I think it says attendees can chat with or something like that.
It just says all panelists.
Correct. That's what you want.
Great. Okay. So I'm set.
Good.
Okay. So have a great night.
There's an alternative setting where you can have attendees chat with panelists and attendees, and you don't want that. That's the decision that steering made, whenever.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. So you're all set.
So wow.
I just saw an email when I was getting my login that apparently Madeline is not going to make the meeting, which is more than unfortunate, but
that's too bad.
Yeah, she said she's.
Hi, Louisa.
And she said she's ill, which worries me too. I was talking with her over the weekend, so.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Hello, Louisa. You're muted. Excellent. Now your sound's not working. Let's try your sound. We can't hear you. Nope, not yet. Good thing we're working out these kinks.
I'm not muted.
Now I hear you. That's great. Don't move. Don't change a thing.
No sudden movements.
Yeah. Okay. I'm your Zoom co-host. I'm your Zoom host, so I will make you a co-host.
Oh, you are?
Yes, I am.
Excellent.
Yes, Susan spent the weekend watching old Friars Club roasts in preparation for being the host.
Bad joke.
Yeah.
I listened to a Zoom webinar at 5 o'clock trying to get up to speed because I'm definitely not. And they spent most of the time kind of pitching all of their Zoom products, of which they now have a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean a webinar that was run by Zoom itself?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. About halfway through, they got to some things, but I sent in on chat, if they could make the screen bigger so when the guy is talking about the stuff, you could see what actually is on the screen that he is sharing with you.
No.
I gave up in the middle. It was too frustrating.
I don't blame you.
Okay.
Although it's not that different than continuing legal education courses where they're also trying to sell you on the next book or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Mark, are you staying for the meeting?
At least for the first part, because they're going to talk about that.
The dueling letters? Yeah.
Let's not call it that. We're being recorded, but
Yeah, we're going to talk about actually the approach that we want to take because.
And Louisa, we're live on YouTube right now.
I'm sorry?
We're live on YouTube right now.
Yes.
Okay.
But there's only 3 of us.
Yes, but we're live on YouTube.
Okay, we don't have a quorum yet.
That's fine. I just said, letting you know, this is being recorded. We
Okay.
have it.
Okay. So I will explain when more people come on, but I think that what we should do is discuss our approach.
Yeah.
And how we would do it, and both letters address different ways of doing it.
Yeah, they sure do. And I wasn't clear from our last meeting, your last meeting, exactly what the consensus was. So it would be great to have that be a topic of discussion.
Right. Well, I think it was to do it, but I think we started with Madeline writing the letter. She asked me to edit it, but then it expanded and she spoke to some other people, and then you very kindly came in to offer a letter, and so did Roberta. So,
Hey, Melissa, I'm the Zoom host. So I made you a co-host, but I'm the Zoom master for the night. And we're already on YouTube live because I don't know how to do it that smoothly, so I've already done it.
All right, thank you so much. I
No
appreciate
problem.
it.
I've made you co-host along with Louisa, and I'll be quietly lurking in the background.
Aren't you a member of the committee?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so you
you
don't have to be that quiet. I have to be quiet and lurk in the background. Although your background is much nicer to lurk in than mine.
Thank you.
no one
I'm
needs
going to
those.
put in a little speaker. Tell me if you hear. Can you hear me?
No, it's gotten staticky in and we've lost your audio. No. Hey, Robert.
Not good.
Hello. That's too
Good to
bad.
know.
Hello.
Hi, Robert.
Robert's going to think I've been stalking him because we've appeared at the same political activities in the last couple of days. So
I think we're guided by the same jazz gods.
I think that's right.
Thelonious Monk.
You know,
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because John Coltrane lived in my hometown for a lot of his later years.
Oh, really?
So,
Oh, my goodness.
yeah, and he would come down, he would go down and play with like local community things.
Get out, yeah.
What was
town
your
is that?
hometown? What
Was
was your
that Louisa?
hometown?
It's on Long Island, Huntington.
Oh, okay.
am I the only one who would prefer that every office didn't turn over at the same time? Yeah, it's really a lot of, it's just,
I think there's about 4 city council members who will continue on.
wow, that's enough continuity.
No, it's about 15, but it's close. It's not great out of like 15.
Well, no, out of the 15, not all of them are running for re-election, I don't think.
Yeah,
It looks like all of them.
I think that's who is, but I could be wrong.
Okay, we have 6 people.
Not a quorum. Ira, looks cold where you are.
You're muted if you're trying to say anything.
You're muted.
That's actually Hippo Hill.
Ah,
Brought us back to winter.
but it doesn't have the bales of hay at the fence.
They're probably actually down there, but you don't realize how steep it is.
Yeah, okay.
Look at this, and everybody thinks it's sort of this mild. When you see the ambulances coming because somebody went over the bales.
That's actually sort of a sore point right now because I fell in Central Park last Tuesday. So I don't want to hear about all, my ambulances. I got an ambulance ride instead of going to full board.
Well,
Are you
it's
I fractured my patella.
Oh my gosh.
It's
Oh,
not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the height of spring migration. I'm not fun to be around.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
hope you're
thank you.
feeling
It's been
okay.
really unpleasant. The only good news is I will not need surgery because it's a vertical break and not a horizontal break, which is information I never wanted to have before.
Right. Right.
Hey, Rich.
Now I know what to wish for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Should I start recording?
Yeah, why not?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Roberta says that she's lost the link and she will join us when she can.
Okay, well, she can always join as an attendee and we can promote her, but whatever.
Any attendees, is there, Susan, is there a blue button on your screen that says start the webinar?
I already did that.
Okay. I'm just surprised that there are no attendees. I mean, you don't always get a lot, but
Oh, there's one.
no sooner do I say it than
It's fine. It's
Then Cindy joins us.
yeah, the agenda was posted late, so that might be why, which is not.
It didn't sound like an exciting topic. It actually is.
Yeah, why don't we get
We
started?
start?
Yeah, I'll just say there's two things to discuss tonight. One is the letter to NYCHA and kind of going through what our goals are and our next steps. And secondly is talking about the district needs statement and kind of assigning roles and process. So Louisa, do you want to kick us off with where we are with the letter to NYCHA and the background and what's been happening behind the scenes?
Right. The first thing is really to talk about what we want to do. We've been talking about approaching NYCHA and bringing in the electeds. And I think, Mark, that what you were talking about was a whole structure of talking to the electeds, building up a program of how we would approach the issues of NYCHA. While Roberta's was pulling in the DNS and just going directly to NYCHA, I see it as a little bit differently, as kind of starting a series of meetings. But what I want to know was how people thought about this, because one of them, if we talk to NYCHA, we're talking directly about fixing things, right? And basically, we're talking about the problems of maintenance. I think that is what is the major concern that most people have who live in NYCHA at the moment. Going to the electeds and getting them behind us is a more long-term thing of how we're going to spend the money that we're hoping to get from infrastructure. That at the moment is still basically very nebulous. We don't know if this is going to happen. So what do people think?
But can I also jump in with, where I think we're at and what might be most productive? So I think how we had discussed it initially was writing a letter to, the mayor and the chair of NYCHA, and that the electeds could potentially be co-signers on the letter. So we don't need to address the letter to them. And to me, the letter should firstly just make the ask right up front. I think Rich did a good job in his version. Secondly, just give minor context about the extreme capital needs and why this is important in our district. And lastly, close just making the ask again. I don't think we should be prescriptive. And I do think that this would be most productive if it is a series of meetings. And since I did say this up front, I think our ask is NYCHA coming to the table with us and the elected officials and NYCHA constituents to talk through kind of a larger plan for addressing the most severe capital needs and also identifying those capital needs. So that's sort of how I see it. But it's, again, we wanted to open it to the committee and see where everyone else is at and what you think is a good next step and way to frame the letter.
And not to make it too unwieldy, who are the people that we are addressing this to? There's a long list of NYCHA executives. Do we want the electeds to be in a supportive role, or do we want them to be primary on this? I don't know. Everybody should start. What do they think? And Rich, I really liked your letter, how you put it together.
Can I respond?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Sorry, I was a little bit late. As I indicated, because I was reading the versions on the phone as I was in other things, I thought Rich's letter was very good and helpful and on the right track as I understood it, and built on Mark's letter. It seems to me that what is being asked for, and I don't have the same history as others here of the Housing Committee, but I do know something about it, that Board 7, with the support of the electeds, is asking for clearer and active participation to communicate to the NYCHA board and policymakers a number of issues and concerns, among them being we don't have to give the detailed menu about maintenance, but our concerns as voiced by the people living in the housing developments in our district about the poor, the slowness, the lack of effectiveness, efficiency, funding on maintenance, and so on. Secondly, we all also want to have an important participatory role of giving our views as our constituents are telling it to us with the electeds on capital funding that is going to be part of allocation in the Biden administration and in general has already been discussed, and advocacy and programs. I mean, one of the meetings here when I was attending was part of that. So why can't we do that and say we're in an era of need and new initiatives and the need also for participation. And we are now reiterating that, the community board with the local officials, and that's what we want to do. And now let's work out a way in which we can be consulting and with each other in an active role that is one that shows participation or representation. That's what I'm trying to say. Some of you know it better, but it seems to me that's appropriate now.
Thank you. Others? Oh, I see, Rich, you have your hand up, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so I thank you for complimenting the letter, which really was just a bastardization of Mark's, cutting
Yes,
out.
okay, that's good.
Yeah, but I think that before we have a letter, I think we have to understand, and I put this in the email, we have to understand what we're asking for and who we're
Right.
asking. And I think there are three things. One is just how the money is spent. Two is the process of asking for collaboration. And three is specific things. And coming out of the NYCHA task force over the past few years, there were three specific areas that were selected as those that were most important, which were maintenance, security, and trash. And so I think a question is, what is our path forward? What are we trying to, I think we know in general terms what we're trying to achieve, but how are we hoping to achieve it? And do we want to be reaching out to NYCHA first? I think the elected officials are on the same page as us, but I think we need to figure out what the process is. There's also the question of it's an election year. So what do we hope to accomplish before the election? What do we want to shine a spotlight on as, even in the next few weeks before the primary to make it part of the election? And what's the path forward for the next few weeks, for the next few months, and then with the new administration? And I think that any of that would inform what the letter might say.
So you're suggesting, Rich, that we start with dealing directly with NYCHA about three basic issues and have the elected support us at that point, and then kind of move from there on to how we would deal with new funds if there are new funds. I mean, asking for a seat at the table when there may not be a setting at the table is a problem.
I mean, I'm not the expert. I don't know the best way to get NYCHA to do anything. And obviously it's not an easy challenge because it's been decades that they haven't been doing what needs to be done. And I don't, by any stretch, claim to have the answer. My gut is that the electeds are supportive. So any outreach to the electeds is preaching to the converted. So I think it might be a matter of reaching out to NYCHA just to ask for a meeting as a first step and having a seat at the table. And maybe proposing, as Mark had, that what is done as a pilot on the Upper West Side could become a model for the rest of the city.
Yeah, just to respond to that, I think you're very right about the electeds already being on board. I think Councilmember Rosenthal already indicated that she would be happy to sign on. So I don't think it's going to be that much of a lift if we want to get all of our electeds to sign on to the ask to get NYCHA to the table. So sorry. Jeanette?
Hi, thanks. I agree with the approach that from Mark and Richard's letter. I think that's the right thing. From my experience, I just have a few recommendations. I think the most important thing here is that we're requesting that whatever funds the city receives, regardless of whether it's the huge infrastructure bill or just minimal amounts, that we want to see participation from NYCHA residents, and
Right.
the community board can help facilitate that. From my experience, unless we're really asking for a very specific item that we want to, fund or whatever, it's better to have this general approach. It's also better to to write the letter to NYCHA or to the mayor, whoever, but then to CC all the local elected officials, because they act like on the tail of the agency to respond. And then it's easy for NYCHA to respond to a letter like this and say, well, we're doing outreach. Look at all our outreach we're doing now through these webinars on the new proposal. And so I would specifically ask that a representative from NYCHA come and meet with us to discuss how they're going to, what the process is for local residential and community participation. Thanks.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Mark?
Thanks. Just to pick up on what Jeanette was saying, I think that there is something definitely in that. I remember a previous meeting, forgive me if it was last one or the one before, where somebody, it may have been one of our federal aid TA presidents, was saying that when you ask to engage with NYCHA, you should ask to engage with people who were involved in the actual systems that we're trying to confront, as opposed to their intergovernmental folks, because we already know what the intergovernmental folks are going to say. I think Jeanette was actually probably just gave a more succinct summary of what they would say than they would. So anyway, the other thing that I wanted to just sort of jump in, this is not my committee, so I apologize for jumping in, but the other thing I wanted to say was that it was my understanding in drafting what a Kickstarter that I did, I'm glad somebody picked it up and ran with it, was that the federal aid folks who had done such great work were going to have their own much more granular letter about maintenance needs and so forth, which is why when I drafted what I did, I was trying to get more toward a thought about what the process should be, as opposed to fix this elevator or address this this thing. Polly probably knows more about the specifics of that and whether I'm making this up or remembering it correctly. But anyway, that's just a thought that I think we might want to keep in the mix as we figure out the path forward. Thanks.
Okay, Polly?
My understanding is that that's correct, that this was actually became two different letters, and but somehow or other it became they became merged together. So Polly, what do you think?
Okay, so I listened to everyone, and I just finished reading what you wrote, Mark, and also Richard. Having worked with NYCHA for many years, huge bureaucracy. My position is that we as the community board, along with the elected officials, should be in a supportive role, but we need to be specific. And so I feel that we need to start again with making sure that we get the top level decision makers at NYCHA to come to CB7 to discuss what you've outlined, Mark, in your letter. According to Congressman Nadler, since he has stated that he allocated $40 billion, okay, from the American Recovery Act, and that NYCHA will be getting a certain portion of that funding, I think we need to start there because we need capital funding for this area. So that's the first step that I feel we need to outline that, and then start from there to work down for the other issues, because elevators and all those other issues come under capital needs, right? So we need to look at the process that they're utilizing now, other than webinars and material being sent out to residents within public housing. What we want are the stakeholders, the decision makers. We want to be able to monitor how that money will be allocated to our area and how it will be spent. So that, to me, should be the focus of any meeting that is established with NYCHA. And it should be ongoing monthly, in my opinion. It should be a continuous meeting. There should be someone from NYCHA who sits with the board on a regular basis as an ombuds person to keep us abreast of what the process is and what's going on. So to me, that's what the letter should entail, and that's where we should start. We should not be all over the place, because if you bombard them with too many asks, so to speak, you lose really the whole purpose of why we want to have them at the table.
Thanks, Polly. Rich, you have another comment?
Yeah, another thing we might think about is, the ask that we have right now, at least per the letter that Mark wrote, was to make sure that they sit at the table with the TA presidents and with NYCHA residents, not with CB7. Do we have those people lined up? And are they supportive of our reaching out? Because it's otherwise it's a little bit weird for us to be asking on behalf of other people without their being on board and their knowing that we're doing.
In my opinion, I thought that was the purpose of the letter, was to reach out to NYCHA to get them to sit down with the federal aid, the leaders of the public housing community here on the Upper West Side. And that's, again, is what I'm stressing. That is the purpose. We need to get them to sit down at the table with the leaders, okay? And CB7 basically should just be the go-between or pipeline, so to speak, to support that discussion along with the elected officials. We need all the eyes, right, and ears, so that we can get different perspectives outside of the agency, because, it hasn't worked in the past where resident leaders have sat down and gotten the decision makers at NYCHA to respond. So what is needed is another pair of eyes with the CB7 organization, along with the elected officials, to put our heads together to figure this out. How can we get things done here on the Upper West Side? Because things are not being done.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to say that, to me, this is a continuation of our discussion. I think it was last month. And I felt like we reached consensus generally with the federal aid leaders that, they would be involved, and the CV could kind of act as a convener, but this would very much be a discussion where we're trying to empower and the NYCHA leaders in the community, that this is not the community board running something, although we could help pull together a task force with the elected officials involved as well. That was my understanding, at least. Ethel, you're muted if you're speaking.
Sorry, just very briefly, I strongly support what Polly outlined. She was giving us, to me, a kind of a map of process based on your experience and how we have to pull it together, that we facilitate, but with the residents at the table and at the community board is helping the residents come to the table along with the elected officials. And it's a force, it's representative, and there's expertise and there's experience, and we should be doing that. And there's been a struggle for so many years, but there's a shot now because there's a lot of money coming through federally, and there's also the experience of the residents and the leaders and Polly and others who have been doing this. So we could, I think the community board can help to facilitate it, not to be, saying what to do, but to help bring it together so that we can achieve what I think everybody is saying, those three, if it's the 3 items on the agenda. I mean, I don't know, but to me, we're getting there. I think that people have been saying much of the same thing in a very helpful way and up to the chairs. But as I listened, I just thought that Rich, Mark, Polly, could be a quick subcommittee, to frame what we've been talking here and make the letter or whatever along the lines. We're on the road in I think a very good way. Do it, and then we can, you know, the committee, the board could sign off on it. We consult with the elected officials, and we get something that's a request and a plan that we all are representing together and go with it in the next very few months. It's a damn good time. I mean, everything's on the table and it's crazy, but it sure is a better time for the shots if we could get it together than it has been.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are reaching consensus, and I don't want to spend too much time with everyone kind of saying the same thing again and again.
Right.
So I think we just need to figure out what one person or two people takes on redrafting the letter, and that can be me and or Louisa, or it can be one of the original letter writers. But I'd like us to take that offline and then recirculate a draft. We can comment over email. I don't even think this needs to come back to committee necessarily, and just get it out the door like this month. So does someone want to volunteer to take that on, or would you prefer the chairs of the committee do that?
Yeah, I'd like to work with Polly.
Okay, great.
That would be good. And
That works.
And I think what we do is we set up a meeting and we invite people to it. We do not do all this back and forth. Are you free for?
Exactly.
You know, that way nothing gets done. And
You mean
Polly and I will talk.
Sorry, do you mean a meeting to discuss the letter, or a meeting?
Could we have, and anyone else who would like to join would be very welcome.
Okay, great. Yeah.
You're meeting to draft the letter.
One thing that could be really handy is just to do it in Google Docs. And
Yeah.
that way everyone can read it and comment without,
I'm sorry, Richard, you kind of went out when you said do it in blank.
if you do it in Google Docs, then other people,
Oh, okay.
you can share it with the committee and or anyone else who's interested. And if you set it up, they can comment without writing, so that you have, you know, a few writers, but everyone else can comment and just make suggestions.
Good idea.
It's an easy collaborative tool to use.
I'm being dragged into learning Google Docs.
It's so handy. Once you get used to it, it's hard to not
That's
use.
what everyone says.
Mark,
Everyone except me. Google Docs hates me. Can I make a quick suggestion, which is that maybe, and I don't want to give other people work, but if Louisa and Polly are going to lead the effort, maybe you take a crack at a draft first and then the Google Docs thing, because drafting by committee never works. So whereas editing by committee does. So, I mean, I'm perfectly available to you for anything that you want, but I don't want to get in the way because you're right, this needs to move. So the fewer people involved in drafting, I think the better.
And that's kind of de facto, because you wouldn't share it until you have a draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. I think we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Okay, the second major item that we need to kind of create a work plan for is the district needs statement and budget priorities and what the housing item should look like. And, you know, we've in the past not really been successful in doing outreach, which we should be doing to local organizations to get a sense of what the needs are for housing. So I wanted to put that forward to the committee and get, you know, thoughts from your experiences on other committees and what's been helpful there, and kind of use that as jumping out point. Wait, Rich, is your hand up on this or something, or the last item? No, okay.
Nope. Does anyone have
suggestions? I mean, in the past, what we've done is use Furman and done basically a statistical analysis, but it would be great if we could, you know, reach out to certain nonprofits, especially in terms of homelessness and shelters, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, some of that belongs in the HHS piece, but agree generally we should definitely reach out. So would a good place to start maybe just be talking through what that list would be? Wow, everyone's very shy. Okay, my first thoughts are Goddard, maybe Project Find. I don't know if Cindy or anyone else has thoughts on who else in the community would be really helpful to talk to about what their specific needs are.
Okay, I'm going to confess that I was multitasking. Which specific needs, Melissa?
So, Councilman, we were
For
talking about
NYCHA?
for the district needs statement, what
Oh.
community outreach we could do that could better inform it. So it's rather than us just taking like data from the Furman Center, just getting more of an on the ground sense of what could be helpful, like, you know, tenant
Yeah.
advocacy or is it
Yeah.
just capital? What do we need? Then NYCHA needs obviously have been a big topic already. So
Well, Furman Center is great. We've never used, the community board hasn't used that resource before, so that's amazing that you could bring that in. But the two tenant advocacy groups that we work with are Goddard Riverside Law Center, and Larry Wood can help connect you with them. And then Housing Conservation Coordinators, they do a lot of tenant advocacy for our district. So I would definitely reach out to them. I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
great, that's super helpful.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have ideas of who we would want to speak to? Mark says tenants and neighbors. I don't know them well. Mark, do you want to give more context to that suggestion?
It's another organization. I actually only know of them and have seen them in meetings of the various CB7 committees. So I'm probably not the best connection to them. And what's the other one?
So tenants and neighbors, their big focus, you can Google, you can noodle around on their website. Mark, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was stepping in while you were thinking of the other one. But tenants and neighbors mostly does state Albany lobbying for legislation. And then there's another one, maybe Met Council on Housing, which is also great, but also mainly state lobbying. And that all makes sense given that the state is where the real action is because everything's regulated by the Department of, what is it, Community Housing, DHCR.
Community renewal.
Yeah, which is a real challenge. I mean, I think we're at a sort of pivotal moment when the federal government has released what allocated something like 2.3 billion for the state. Most of it is coming to the city. And because, and maybe Erica wants to jump in on this, but because I actually don't know why, but the housing rental relief program will be administered through the Office of People with Disabilities at the state level. And basically, the state and the city are in the middle of designing a sort of contractual agreement about what nonprofits in the city will be advising, helping tenants fill out their paperwork and then submitting it through OTDA to get the money. Okay, everyone feel free to jump in. What have I missed?
Jeanette? You're muted.
Sorry, not that Helen has missed anything, but I did have I did have a thought, and I'm not up to date on this, but the previous law where they said that you automatically can get counsel for if you're being sort of like kicked out of your
Right to
house.
counsel.
Right to counsel, exactly. I'm not sure if
It's
that was,
just been expanded citywide.
it now covers our neighborhood.
Yeah, as of June 21st.
I was
Right,
gonna say,
but
for that.
what you could do, and especially given this, our Upper West Side, is you could ask that those eligible for right to counsel, that it include higher AMIs. So I'm not exactly sure where the cutoff is right now for right to counsel. But if it's 80% AMI, you could ask for 100% or 120%. I think the other thing, sorry, now I actually just have a couple of ideas for you. Is that all right?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I mean, I love what Jeanette just said. And did I interrupt you, Jeanette? You have your hand up. Did you want to keep going? The other one is so increase in AMI levels for access to right to counsel. Also, you could ask for, I just had brain fog. I mean, definitely, obviously, more affordable housing. You know, I don't know if you want to get into the thorny issues of NYCHA and more affordable housing, poly, and definitely, oh my God, total brain fog, would know more about Douglas houses. Who am I thinking of, Polly, than I do?
Madeline, you're thinking of Madeline, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
About infill at Douglas, but at Harborview, actually, which is south of you, so doesn't matter. The other thing you could ask for is the weatherization programs at the NYCHA buildings. I know Wise Rehab hasn't been done yet, and they're incredibly important. But the brownstones were done, I think, Polly. You could check on all that with Venus and Cynthia. Oh, I know, the other obvious one. You can ask for, if you want to, you know, there's a big issue with getting a voucher for affordable housing. And right now, the situation is that the state eliminated almost all funding for housing vouchers. That was the old Advantage program back in Bloomberg. And so the city has tried to make up for it with a program called City FEPS or FAHEPS. And the amount of money that you get for the city voucher is so low that city council staff just did an analysis that showed there are only like 500 apartments that are available at that, at the level of the FAHEPS voucher. But the demand for city FAHEPS is the people who qualify, and the demand of people who have the vouchers is over 5,000. So it's sort of, you know, there's this tug of war between the city and the state. And as Wise community board members, you could, you know, tell the state to cut it out and to put up their fair share for the vouchers. So it would get back to what we had under the Advantage program, where we split it half and half. And then the city and the state split the cost half and half. And then that would be enough money. And then, you know, obviously raise the amount up to the Section 8 voucher amount. And then that would be enough money to get people housed. The amount of affordable housing at the city FEPS rate, I think there's like a 1.1 vacancy rate, but at the Section 8 level is 3.5% vacancy. So there's more availability at the Section 8 level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, is there current city council legislation for this? I thought there
Yes,
was.
124.
Like, what are the odds that it gets passed sometime this year before maybe even before
I think it's high, but and what it would require is that the city just pay for the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, I personally think that's like incredibly obnoxious of the state not to pay for half. And I think, you know, a letter from this community board could be meaningful, you know, to say that we should go back, if you want to do this, go back to how it was under the Advantage program, because then the amount will be big enough to be meaningful. And leaving the burden on the city is, you know, typical outrageousness.
Yeah, I also wonder, I feel like home stability support on the state level was, I don't know, very close to passing in the budget or before that last year.
Right.
So I don't know how that dovetails with this effort and if there's a way to,
I
yeah.
mean, it's sort of hard because you're just dealing with the city's budget. You know, you're doing the district needs statement or the budget
Yeah, I'm just, since this
desires,
sounds
and
like,
that's,
yeah, this sounds like it could be a letter outside of
yeah,
that as
that's
well.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But yes, and I think it's a good item to include also just as part of the DNS and budget.
Yeah. Those are the big ones.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And
Mhm.
to the NYCHA ask, I think, Polly, the report that you all put together, the federal aid, could be really helpful in informing what we list in that piece. And I definitely think that that should be a major part of the DNS. So let's think about how to pull from that.
Yeah. Right.
Great.
I did share the report, so if you guys want to, I know Luis and I were going to work together on the letter, but I, you know, just want to make sure you guys know I did send everyone a copy of the report. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can probably,
Google Docs.
yeah, literally pull language from there for the DNS
Okay.
and use that for the NYCHA piece.
Okay.
Since you guys already put the work in, and it's great. So.
Yes, we did. And it's an important piece. Yeah.
That's really helpful. Any other thoughts? Jeanette, were you, anything else you wanted to add? Or should I just lower your hand? Okay, very good.
Sorry, I
Councilmember.
keep my hand raised.
No worries.
Well,
Councilmember, is there something else that you wanted to throw out there? No, hands lowered. Sorry. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Mark, you go and then I'll talk.
No, you go first. Okay, the only other thing I would mention, and I think that this dovetails really nicely with the report that Polly presented last time. I think it was last time, my brain anyway, is that I heard a joke from somebody who, my age, who said, when I say it happened the other day, it could be any time between yesterday and 12 years ago. Anyway, the more specific we are, the more with respect to budget priorities now, not with necessarily DNS, but with budget priorities. I don't think we should say fix the doorknob on 863, but the more specific we are, the more likely we are to get taken seriously. At least that's the feedback I was getting from the Office of Management and Budget. This committee, for example, had really compelling statements about NYCHA in your DNS, but they didn't take our budget priorities that associated with them quite seriously because they weren't fix this, fix that. So anyway, I think that that's a good leverage point, at least in one aspect, at least the budget priorities aspect of it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's helpful. Sorry, quick item. I think we're limited this year in how many budget items we get. Does anyone remember that number? Just, we should keep that in mind. And, the DNS can be those bigger ideas that are more general, but I think, like Mark said, that the budget asked specifically, because we have very few, should be specific.
Well, I defer to Roberta, who's the author of that limitation, but I believe it was overall 20 and 20. So 20 expense and 20 capital. But with the proviso that if you had other things that you thought were important that didn't make the cut for the top 20, that you could still compose your own housing committee letter to, whether it's HPD or DHCR, whoever it is that you'd be writing to, saying, in addition to the top, let's say 5 of our 10 top priorities made the overall CB7 list, but here are 5 more that are equally important that didn't make the cut, and we commend them to your attention, to something like that.
Definitely CC me on a letter like that so I can follow up and, something around a little bit. I think the 2 other things I was going to mention are that, just to give a little context, our district, we track, we should use Furman Center data. So Louisa, I should probably ask you how to do that. But we do a painstaking analysis of the loss of affordable housing in our district every year. And the number is between 300 and 500 units of affordable housing every year since 2015. So pretty much since when I started. And, you know, obviously we've not made up for that. I mean, a couple hundred units here or there, but we've lost significant affordable housing, and it's either through harassment and legal evictions, or it's through buyouts. So tenant buyouts and they just give up their apartments, and the next person to come in doesn't realize it's a rent regulated unit, and they get charged some absurd amount of money. And so we do a couple of things in our office. I'm sure Erica does this too, but where, you know, we will urge people to search DHCR to see if their unit that they're in is actually a market rate unit, because you can write them and get it brought back into regulation if you're the new tenant of record, which is pretty great. But, you know, the building where there's a cantilever now over Equinox, what is that, 91st and Broadway?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they bought out all the tenants there. So that was total loss of affordable housing. That was about, what, a couple of hundred units, between 100 and 200 units gone. So that's how they do it. So we've lost a lot of affordable housing in our district, and it's a problem. Another thing you might want to ask for is, you know, when Mark, you were just now talking about specifics, and you said, well, not the doorknob at this building. Although actually, one thing I just tried to fund using city capital money was replacing all the doors at the Hostos at that development, because the doors are in not good shape. So this would be like 225 doors. And I got word from OMB that it was not capitally eligible.
Weird.
So it's like $1 million for these doors. And because each door is not $50,000, it is not capitally eligible. And there is no way that I have access to, although you could certainly ask for it, $1 million in expense money. Now, when I press OMB about it, they do the usual dance and they say it's the controller just put in a new directive saying that, you know, the doors, even though they're contiguous and in one building, and we're ripping out the door jambs and taking them all out, it's not capitally eligible. So maybe part of your ask could be to the controller to say, look, the doors in this building are 40 years old, and you don't think they're going to be, you know, like, you can't, you know, depreciate these doors. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think, my personal 2 cents. That's it.
Great. Susan, I know you've been wanting to speak and weren't able to.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm usually the person who bangs the drum for affordable housing and trying to reclaim, in addition to preserving and creating affordable housing. But I have to say that I think that NYCHA is the single biggest issue we've got in terms of our housing committee. And I would say, I don't want to water down the ask for the NYCHA situation. And I would say all guns on deck pointed at that, and really go after it whole hog. That's just all I have to say. I really feel very strong about this. Helen, with all due respect, I have to say, in my building, we've lost a lot of housing that's affordable in the time I've been working on this. And I don't know if your analysis is based on the DHCR records, but I think it might be more than what you're saying.
Yeah, it could very well be. It's DOF records
Yeah,
that
so
I
I think
work off of.
I think it's got to be more than that based on my one building. But anyway, I
And
want to say that.
no, Susan, you're exactly right. And a huge frustration. I mean, your building, you know, has been heartbreaking to watch those units go. And They've gone because of tenant harassment, and our zip codes had not before been eligible for right to counsel. And the building owners just confuse people, bring them to court, confuse them some more. We've been able to help, as you know, 1 or 2 tenants, but not enough. And you've done an amazing job in your building trying to hold it together. It's terrible what's done in these buildings.
But I think that pales in comparison to what, what is going on in the NYCHA buildings. And I really want to say that, anything I could say that's horrifying about what goes on in rent stabilized, rent controlled units pales in comparison. I really want to say that the housing committee should put all of our focus on NYCHA right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Rich, I think you were now.
Yeah, just 2 quick things. One is I agree that NYCHA really should be our core focus. Hypocritically, and also a little bit off topic, but something Helen just said made me think, if landlords are buying out tenants and then not telling the new tenants that their apartments are rent regulated, can there be a law requiring them to notify tenants of the status of the rent regulated status of any rent regulated apartment?
Right, so it would
And
have
with
to,
enough of a penalty so that they comply?
right, it would have to be state law. The city can't do that. And my guess is there already is one, and I would guess this is part of being an unscrupulous landlord.
Can that be enforced then by the city?
Well, I'm happy to look into it, but it's the nature of the beast. I would really ask state representatives about this, but it's a great question, Rich.
Sorry, I lost my Zoom screen. Doug, okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was, I'm hoping that the rent reform laws are slowing down the loss of some of the affordable stock in our neighborhood in the city. There are laws that, even though there's unscrupulous landlords, that you can't just buy out a tenant anymore without really papering it up. And also there's a disincentive now, because if it was a law-abiding landlord, they can't bring the apartment up because of the vacancy allowance is gone. And so I'd like to think that some of that is mitigating the loss, I hope. And I see Susan shaking her head no, but I know that there's a little bit of a disincentive. My folks live in a rent-controlled apartment, and I've seen documentation and what the letters now look like, because they can't reach out and sort of harass a tenant to be bought out. So I'm just wondering if there's any slowing of a pace of the loss of affordable since and also, by the way, on that DHCR search, boy, I'd love to get a bunch of young college students to do a DHCR search on every single one of our rent-controlled apartments in our district. Just do them all. I mean, we've done such a great job with signing up for vaccine, but there's treble damages if a landlord did charge the rent, they can go back at 300%. And I know cases where that actually happened.
Yeah, there's a group called, I think it's HRI, Housing Resources, Inc., run by Aaron Carr. Yeah, where he is doing exactly that and suing landlords like crazy, trying to get these units back into affordable housing. He's done an amazing job. And yes, he takes a lot of interns to help him out with that. But Doug, one of the reasons I would guess we don't know yet about the effectiveness of the new state laws, which were fabulous, is because of the pandemic. So they went into effect like right when the pandemic hit. And, I mean, the possibility of the floodgates opening on evictions is high. And it's the real concern.
Yeah, I just want to, on a broader, like, what's our budget priorities tack? Just what do people think of making our budget priorities just NYCHA, as Susan suggested, and then in our DNS addressing the other needs, and then in addition to that, sending a letter on the city council legislation about increasing the rental voucher amount for city FEPs. What do people think about that, making the budget priorities since we're a limited number of just NYCHA items and using the federal aids report to inform what those are?
That's interesting. Why don't we start out doing that and see if it works? Be interesting. So in other words, our budget portion would only be NYCHA, but we would deal with the whole district and other needs in the DNS portion.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try it.
Any other responses to that structure?
I just wonder though, if there's some pots of funding that can't be used for NYCHA that I mean, typically I think the city allocates funds, like it puts it in different silos, so to speak. And so, yes, maybe we primarily should focus on NYCHA, but if there's other things, include them as well. And then I also think, I can't remember, but I think most of Polly's report was capital expenses. And so do we have, I think some of the other things we discussed are not capital.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So maybe just our capital items are NYCHA focused and then expenses.
Mark, how does that divide? Because, Jeanette's right. I've always heard that the city does not fund NYCHA. And so how would it work?
It does provide capital.
Well,
I mean, the city pays for a lot of NYCHA. I mean, we pay for it to, I'm sorry, that was to Mark.
well, I was about to say that we have the council member on who also used to work at the Office of Management and Budget. So I would look to Helen first. My understanding is similar to that of Helen. I think that Helen, is it correct that an awful lot of the expense budget of NYCHA is city funded, but the capital comes elsewhere, or are they both heavily funded by cities?
I mean, the federal government and the state over the period of time, right, 20, 30 years, has abandoned NYCHA.
Yeah.
And so with all the losses from the federal government and the state government, the city has had to make up the difference.
Yeah.
And we do a crappy job of making up the difference. And that's why we're $40 billion behind on capital repairs, for example. The city didn't, starting 30 years ago, keep its commitment to fully fund or have a commitment to fully fund NYCHA. I mean, it's really a federal program, and it's why we're in the disgraceful position we're in,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to get even more complicated if that controller's rule used to be that you could bundle non-capital eligible items to get up to a capital eligible request. And if that's out the door, literally as well as figuratively.
I didn't check about computers. I think computers still can be bundled onto that cart, computer cart, but just not doors. It's crazy. But it's on, the city makes up the difference for capital and expense costs. Now, one of the reasons our developments, the federal aid, are often left out of some funding is because they were built to be funded by the city and the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the state said, maybe not. So now the city has had to really pay 100%. And that obviously is problematic.
Yeah. Quick aside, I see the Times just endorsed Catherine Garcia for mayor, so I'll put that out there.
Wow, not surprised. Very cool.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, that's helpful context. Just wait, to drill down in the comptroller guidance, nothing can be bundled or just not doors?
All I heard about, I just was trying to get some doors funded. So that's all I happen to know about it. And often OMB and the controller's office do this kind of thing, you know, it's their fault. So I have not checked in with the controller's office to see what they would say. I asked OMB to triple check and they promised me that doors are not capitally eligible. I went to the general manager and, you know, complained about it. And he said doors are not capitally eligible.
Okay, so doors, got it. Erica, since you're in the room and we've been referring to state matters a lot, it'd be great to hear from you if you have any.
Yeah, I also just want to piggyback off of what Councilmember Rosenthal just said about the doors, because I don't know which development you guys were referring to, because Amsterdam houses and Amsterdam addition, the assembly member paid for all of their front doors to be paid to be done. So I don't know.
No,
I mean,
front doors,
Mhm.
doors, I'm paying for the ones up here to be
Oh,
done
okay.
as well. No, this is
Mhm.
individual apartment
You want
doors.
individual doors? Okay, that wasn't clear. For the state, I think one of the things that was left out of the discussion is that after the 2019 rent laws were passed, many landlords, and they said this in the news, was we are going to withhold rent regulated units from the market. We are no longer going to rent them because of the repeal of vacancy decontrol. So a rent regulated unit is rent regulated forever now. And so, I'm sorry, rent stabilized unit. And so there was a lot of talk about that. And we have seen many of that. We've actually in Susan's building at, the South Pierre, we've had to basically force the landlord to rent out a rent stabilized unit to a woman who needed it for her niece. And it's happened multiple times in other buildings. And so that's why the assembly member has also introduced legislation that would prevent warehousing, because that is one of the issues we are seeing. We're also seeing that within the Croman buildings, and everyone knows Stephen Croman is one of the worst landlords ever. He had to pay all of this restitution to the landlords he harassed for years. And now, he's down to the couple final payments, and he's like, you know what, I actually am not going to pay that because my units are vacant because of COVID, where in fact, many of those units were vacant. He left many of those rent stabilized vacant units vacant before COVID, and he's using that as an excuse. It's like an orphan killing, their parent, or a person, killing their parents. Be like, you know what, I don't have any parents now. He is literally pulling that with his own rent regulated units. And so a lot of it we are seeing is there are rent regulated units there, but landlords are also refusing to rent them out. I don't know what they're waiting for, but that is one of the issues. And so that's one of the assembly members' bills to crack down on warehousing. And there was other things. I just want to go back to what Doug had mentioned. The council member mentioned that Aaron Carr works on he works on unearthing rent regulated units. It's more for 421A. And so because for HCR, for like a regular rent regulated unit, I'm going to use Susan's building again. It is, sorry, Susan, but I can't find out the rent regulation status of a certain apartment within Susan's building. I probably could if I asked and, went off the record, but they usually say that is, HCR will say that is only for the tenant on record to know. So if you move into that unit, you're allowed to ask your rent history. I probably shouldn't know, which unit, not that I shouldn't know, but they're saying no one else but that person should know which units are rent regulated. So that is one of the problems, because there's another issue in a building, on 72nd Street where there's supposed to be rent regulated units within that building. But HCR can't tell me which ones. They can only tell me the total number of affordable units within the building and how many there were supposed to be. But I can't figure out.
Is that managed by my landlord too, Erica?
I'm sorry, what? No,
Is that managed by my landlord also?
Not the Brodsky one on 72nd Street. And so just to answer that question, it's hard. We can't actually go through some of the rent rolls because I can't actually get them for specific units. And so I can bring that back to the legislative team. I know there's been much discussion about this over the years of how to get around that. There are certain agreements between city and state agencies and state agencies about sharing that information, like HPD and HCR, they share that information, but it's not public record. And so I just wanted to cover that. But I would say NYCHA is, I think, one of the, I agree with what Susan and what other people were saying about NYCHA being one of the biggest affordable housing issues that, CB7 and really, people should be focusing on. We work very closely with Amsterdam Houses Edition and the Amsterdam Houses, as well as Harborview and CB4. And there was a man whose wall, he had a leak in his wall, persistent leak. One day it just fell down, and NYCHA would not fix it until we wrote a letter and said, you have to fix his wall. That's your job as the landlord. Don't be a slumlord. And then they fixed the wall, but it was a persistent leak for years. And these aren't like, he's not an anomaly here. And so that happens all the time where we have those specific issues. Also for NYCHA, they're obviously they're not trustworthy. During the bomb cyclone of, whatever winter that was, there was someone who called in from Harborview Terrace and said, we don't have heat. The heat's gone. And then we call NYCHA, we're talking about it. They say they had people go out to inspect. They happened to tell me they went to an apartment where I actually knew somebody who lived there. We called them. Nobody had gone to their apartment. No one, it was a falsified record. So we cold call through the entire Harborview Terrace building to find out who had heat, if an inspector really came. There were no inspectors. People did not have heat. We had to put up such a fight just to have the boiler fixed. Yeah. So they, in addition to them just like not providing, information or just not doing their jobs, they also sometimes seem to make things up. Yeah. And then you have to catch them and go through that. So I think NYCHA is really a great choice because we have so many issues in there.
Yeah, I appreciate all that context. Just to bring us back, I kind of went on a tangent. Next steps, and maybe it's just my blood sugar dropping. But I don't know where we landed on what should be in our capital versus expense items. I think, are people okay with keeping capital to NYCHA and then expense to be more of the programmatic needs? We don't, need to take a vote, but maybe just like a straw poll. Are people okay with that approach? And we can start by drafting a list of what would be on each.
So just to be a pain in the ass, and sorry I didn't raise my hand, but NYCHA, the needs are on expense and capital. So if you wanted to do some NYCHA expense asks, it would be more maintenance workers at each of the developments. Polly, what do you think about that? More support for the tenant.
Yeah, definitely there's a shortage of caretakers and maintenance. That's definitely priority. So that should be on the list for an expense. Definitely understaffed. And they're the frontline workers, basically, that, directly provide services. And then also there's a shortage of, I guess you would call them, they're like repairs, like not only trades, but they usually have someone on staff that if there's an emergency, they can come in and say if there's a leak or if there's a flood, so staff regarding emergency repair services, there's a shortage.
Okay, I think there's been a number of items raised, so we can try to take a pass at just putting together like a bulleted list of what those things are. And again, I think we'll reference the report that Polly shared for more detailed both capital and expense items. Does anyone on the committee want to take more of a leadership role in putting the DNS and budget priorities together? Just because my capacity honestly is low outside of our meetings. Okay, since there hasn't been anyone jumping to volunteer, I guess Louisa and I could take a first pass at it, putting together the list and circulate it for next month to discuss as part of the agenda.
I mean, Melissa, I'll help out and contribute for the NYCHA portion, of course.
That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'll put together a first like bulleted list, not a texty DNS, but just focus on the budget priorities and then what should we address in the DNS.
Okay. If we have nothing else for this evening,
Yeah, I think we can adjourn unless there's anything else.
thank you, everybody. Thank you, Helen.
Motion to adjourn.
Great. Second.
Thank you.
It's so great to have a council member actually
Yeah, thank
with
you.
us. Yeah.
And Erica. See you both.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
And Louisa, feel free, and Melissa, feel free to reach out if you need more details.
We
Happy
definitely.
to help.
Yeah, especially on the letter. I'd like to.
Yeah. Good job.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.